So, my question to you is, who don't you trust? So over the next 5 minutes, I'm going to introduce you to what I think is a fabulous model around trust. It really helps you enable to work out, well, what is it about trust? So who don't you trust and why don't you trust them? Trust is quite an interesting concept, isn't it? Sometimes it can be quite intangible. When we think about that person that we don't trust, what is it? Are you able to actually articulate what it is about them that you don't trust? I know George this morning has talked about trust, and Megan just spoke very briefly then about trust. So trust is everywhere. But what is it? Well, trust is a general assessment we make of how well others take care of or are likely to take care of our concerns. So when we think about the person and why we don't trust them, is it because they can't take care of what we are concerned about? Trust can involve one or multiple assessments. So when you think about that person you don't trust, it might be because of one thing, but it might be actually because of several things. Trust is both emotional and linguistic. And what I mean by that is, when we think about that person we don't trust, we have an emotional response. We might feel anger, we might feel anxiety. But it's linguistic, and that assessment is made in our head. The story starts in our head. So trust is the glue that holds relationships together. And you think about that in a boardroom. A boardroom is full of people who are working together to try and achieve something for the organisation. They have to trust each other. And trust is the emotional lubricant of an organisation. If you don't have trust in an organisation is very limited in terms of what it can achieve. So let me introduce you to my risky model. Trust is made up of reliability, involvement, sincerity, and competence. So let's break those down. Reliability is about whether we believe that the person meets the time and the standards. So when you think about reliability and you think about a board member who constantly turns up late, we start to believe is unreliable. When we think about the fact that we have a standard to say we want those board papers on time and they don't turn up, we start to say, well, how reliable is that CEO in terms of delivering those board papers? The second element of trust is called involvement, attuned to others' concerns as well as their own. So that means that the person that you trust isn't only thinking about themselves, but they're also thinking about you. In the boardroom, how involved is that board member in what the organisation is trying to achieve? Do they engage themselves in other activities separate to the boardroom? So do they turn up, do they lobby, do they try and fundraise for the organisation? So involvement is not only about turning up at the board meeting, but it's doing those other sorts of activities. The third one is sincerity. What you see is what you get, and people mean what they say. When I talk about trust and about the element of emotion, often with sincerity, it's a feeling that we get. We feel the person is not sincere. It might be the board member who steps up onto the board, but's really only there for their own agenda. You know, they're not really sincere about making a commitment to the organisation. And the fourth element is competence. You know, Alicia and I were really challenged with this one with young leaders. People said, oh, but they're not competent, they don't have the skills, they don't have the experience. So competence is an assessment we make about whether people can do something. You don't want on a board your treasurer who's never had anything to do with finances. You know, all of a sudden you go, they're not competent, I don't trust them. So in terms of trust, there's trust builders and there's trust breakers. So when we think about trust, we cannot relate in meaningful and productive ways if we don't trust each other. And the way that we can produce productive relationships is to build trust. But what are trust busters? Trust busters are when we say we're going to do something and we don't do it. When we make a commitment and a promise and we don't deliver. When we take credit for somebody else's work. They're trust busters. Trust builders, isn't it a fantastic picture? What builds trust is when we step up, when we do something different, when we offer ourselves forward, when we actually say to somebody, they did that, that wasn't me, when we listen to other people and we build in confidence in other people. Now, I promised I would only take 5 minutes. I want you to think I'm reliable, so that's my 5 minutes and that's my trust model. Thank you.